Over the past few years, I've realized the importance of setting myself up for success on a daily basis. A lot of the actions that improve my life are ones where I might have to do some prep a bit ahead of time, but at the same time, they also take very little or almost no effort. Engaging in these habits sets me up for a successful day or a more peaceful following day. And these habits also help me feel calm and reduce my stress levels overall. Hi everyone, my name is Carly. On this channel, I create videos around personal finance, my experiences in the modeling world, and also I create videos on living intentionally. So if any of those topics are interesting to you, please subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. My first habit is that I stop eating after a certain hour. Usually that's around 8 p.m. for me. I used to love snacking throughout the day at all hours. I loved having an after dinner snack, especially a sweet one. If I want to eat something, I don't always have the best portion control. So for me, it's easier to eat nothing instead of eating a few chips or half of a cookie. Sometimes I still do partake in an after dinner snack, but now when I do, I am aware of the consequences. I find that personally when I eat snacks after dinner or a particularly large dinner, I will feel quite bloated the next morning. This isn't a hard and fast rule for me by any means. For example, if I'm hanging out with friends, I won't restrict myself too much. But if it's a regular weeknight and I'm in my house alone, then I will generally close my kitchen after 8 p.m. And I do notice that when I stop eating at a certain time, I find that I feel better and I sleep better too. There's a variety of research that shows eating before bed is good for you. There's also research that shows not eating before bed is more optimal. So personally, I just make my decisions based off of how my body feels in this area. The night before a day where I'll be running around the city, which is most days, I like to pack my bag and prep for my mornings the night before. Once I leave my apartment, I'm gone for a good chunk of the day. That means I have to carry everything I need, and I really hate forgetting things. Usually I'll bring a breakfast, sometimes my lunch, my laptop, maybe some gym clothes, and a change of clothes for after the gym too. And in the mornings I wake up pretty early, so my mind isn't always with it. I tend to move pretty slowly. I prefer not to have to think that much, and if I do my nightly prep ahead of time, it works out perfectly because I'll have done all of the thinking the night before. I used to scroll on my phone before bed. I don't think it was particularly egregious. I would spend maybe 10 to 20 minutes scrolling after when I had originally intended to fall asleep. Certainly it could be much worse, and in the moment it seemed like small snippets of time. But if you look at it holistically, losing 10 to 20 minutes of sleep a day over the span of a week might add up to maybe 2 hours of sleep I was losing. That's a good chunk of time. Even outside of delaying sleep, if I do work before bed, usually on my laptop, I find it is harder for my brain to shut off. If I do work before bed, I'm now thinking about all of the work I was doing and what else I have to do the next day as I'm lying in bed with my eyes closed. These days, I still want some sort of relaxing activity to do before bed. So in an effort to be a little bit more health conscious, I started reading fiction before bed as my form of entertainment. I feel like I'm using my imagination. I get pretty sucked into books if they're good. And I just overall really enjoy myself when I read. People say reading makes them sleepy. I don't know if reading necessarily makes me sleepy unless I was already quite tired, but I think it is a really great relaxing activity before bed. I also charge my phone far away from my bed, and I'll try to make my book the last thing I look at before I fall asleep. I use an analog alarm clock to wake myself up. It's this thing I've had since like junior year of high school. Having a separate alarm clock gets me out of bed pretty quickly because there's no phone nearby for me to start scrolling when I wake up. And just like how I set a wake-up alarm, I also set a sleep alarm. If I'm not careful in the evenings, I will very easily lose track of time, especially when the days are longer. This means even if I'm not scrolling social media, I might find myself sleeping later than I intend to. Sleep is really important to me. I ask a lot of my body when it comes to work and fitness, so in turn, I need to make sure that I'm giving my body the time it needs to recover. This habit really came about because if I was ever engrossed in something, whether it be a book, a show, or scrolling on my phone, I would sleep later than I intended to. As a result, I would wake up the next morning not feeling my greatest and maybe take a bit more time than usual to do my morning routine. At a certain point, I was just thinking, I can't keep doing this to myself, so I started setting an alarm a few minutes before I wanted to go to sleep. So if my bedtime is at 10:30 p.m., I might set an alarm at 9:30 to start getting ready for bed. Then I'll have half an hour to 45 minutes to wind down and do my activities like reading or journaling. This gives me a good chunk of time to relax, and then I might have another alarm at 10:25 as my 5-minute warning before lights off. My next micro habit is finishing all of the groceries in my fridge. Finishing all of the food I buy is so satisfying because not only do I feel accomplished for not wasting food, I'm also able to successfully calculate how much food I need for the week. I feel like that's a fairly niche adulting experience, but that's the case for me. And then on the flip side, I get to go grocery shopping and fill up my fridge with good food that I will eat that week. One of my friends in college told me that when our fridge is full after grocery shopping, we become happier. I never thought about it that way, but when she told me that, it made so much sense. And now every time my fridge is full, I feel happier and I think of her. Hi, Jennifer. Another micro habit I partake in is making things from scratch that I buy often. I'm realizing that some of the staples I used to buy from the grocery store really aren't that hard to make. Usually the limiting factor is kitchen equipment. A few things I commonly make from scratch are yogurt, hummus. I make most of my meals from scratch, though my meals tend to be a little bit more basic. Sometimes I'll make granola from scratch if I'm feeling like it. It's not only satisfying to eat something I know I created, but I also know exactly what's going into my food. There aren't any major preservatives or like odd chemicals that I can't pronounce, and I can make adjustments that serve my personal tastes. Yes, I realize sometimes it does take more time, but personally it's an activity I enjoy doing and I see it as one of those things I do to unwind. I will put on a podcast or some music and hang out with myself as I make these things for the week. Every morning I write a list of items I want to get done. I feel like this is especially important now that I work freelance and my income is directly dependent on my output. I have my work responsibilities and I have my personal life maintenance responsibilities. And at the end of the day, I have to get these things done or my life just won't run as smoothly. This is my notebook. So at the beginning of the day, I'll just brain dump everything I want to do. As I go throughout the day, I'll just cross things off with my highlighter, and it's nice to add a little bit of color to my day. I don't always get to everything. As you can see, there's some gaps here. But in my mind, I have an idea of what the top priority things are, so I make sure to cross at least those off of my list. And I add a lot of things to my list. Even if it's a relatively small task, it is still something that takes time out of my day to complete, so I give myself credit for completing it. I think this is one of my favorite micro habits because in the past, I would just go about my day and of course I would do things, but at the end of the week, I never really knew what I spent my days doing. If someone asked me, what did you do this week? I would say work, but I feel like I never really remembered what that work entailed specifically. So if I ever wonder exactly what I did that week, I can just flip back to the pages of that particular week and it'll be a good reminder of what I accomplished. Kind of in the same vein of writing a daily to-do list, I write down all of my ideas. I never know when an idea will come to me. Sometimes it's in the most random moment when I'm thinking about something which leads me to another thought process, and then all of a sudden I have a light bulb moment for like the next video I'll make. So if I don't write down my ideas right away, there's a high chance I won't remember them later. Once I write them down, it's almost like a weight lifted off my shoulders because I don't have to spend my mental energy trying to remember these ideas again for later. I usually jot down the big idea in my notes app, and then I'll add some detail to supplement the idea so I know what I want to expand upon later. And if later on I find that the idea no longer suits my channel or the direction in which I want to go, then I will just delete it from the list. If it's still a good idea, but not for right now, I'll put it in the backlog and think about implementing it maybe next month or sometime else in the future. Voice to text saves me an incredible amount of time. I use voice to text to draft out a lot of my YouTube scripts. Speaking into the microphone is faster than typing the whole script out. I'll usually speak into the microphone on my phone and I'll have the draft up on my laptop at the same time to make sure that the mic is picking up all of the right words. Voice to text is also a game changer for taking advantage of the small bits of time I have throughout the day, maybe when I'm on the subway or waiting in line. I'll also add bits and pieces to my scripts with voice to text if I'm out and about. Then later I'll go back in and revise and edit on my laptop as necessary. And when I do this, it saves me a lot of time because I don't have to preserve a huge chunk of time to work on my script. Many of the big ideas are already on the document, and by the time I go back and revise it, I only have to shift around a few things and proofread it a few times for ease and clarity. This habit is most helpful if I'm starting a brand new script because I can just start speaking and laying down my ideas. I think the revising and editing is easier to do on the laptop. My next micro habit is that I simply don't finish things that I don't want to finish. This habit pretty much applies to anything I consume, whether it be a book, a movie, it may be a TV show, it might even be a meal. I will say it mostly applies to content. When it comes to a book or a show, sometimes I still want to know what happens in the plot, but spending my time experiencing the story is not worth the time to me. So I will just go online for spoilers. If I choose to stop consuming something, it's because I'm no longer enjoying it or it doesn't interest me anymore. I'd rather spend my time doing something else that actually brings me joy. I could instead go for a walk, hang out with a friend, or read another book. That way I get my time back and I no longer feel pressure to complete something simply because I started it. Those are just a few of the micro habits I have that make my life easier. Some of them may work for you. Maybe others you'll realize that they don't work for your lifestyle. To recap, I will stop eating after a certain hour. The night before a big day, I make sure I am prepped with everything I need. I don't partake in screens before bed, and I set a sleep alarm so that I make sure to go to sleep on time. I finish all of the food in my fridge. I also make things from scratch. I'll write down everything I need to do. I'll also write down all of my ideas before I forget them. I love using voice to text if I have to write a lot. And finally, I won't finish what I don't want to finish. And if you like this video, you might also enjoy this video here on all of the lessons I took from my early 20s.